Arizona Territory, 1868. The desert had a way of swallowing sound, of erasing voices until nothing remained. Yet grief was louder than sand and sun, and it refused to be buried. Wren Vale's sobs drifted across the cracked earth as she knelt beside a newly turned grave, her fingers shaking as they pressed into soil already stiffening beneath the relentless heat. Her pale hair, once pinned neatly beneath a proper bonnet, had been torn loose by the wind, whipping against her face as though the land itself echoed the turmoil tearing through her chest. She was only 23, dressed in mourning black, a color meant for endings, not the future she no longer recognized. "Bram," she whispered, her throat raw, her voice scraped thin from hours of crying. Her hand traced the rough wood of the simple cross marked with his name. "How am I supposed to go on without you?" Above her, the Arizona sun burned, without mercy, indifferent to loss. Heat shimmered along the horizon, warping the air and stretching the emptiness until it felt as though it existed not just around her, but inside her as well. Wren Vale had been a good husband, not perfect perhaps, but solid where it mattered. He had carved this ranch out of unforgiving ground, with stubborn resolve and blistered hands. He had loved Wren with a quiet steadiness that gave her balance in a world that offered little. And now he was gone, taken by the venom of a rattlesnake while repairing the north fence. One moment alive, the next consumed by fever and poison. By nightfall, Wren Vale was a widow. Behind her stood the only other soul who had come to mourn Koda, tall and motionless, watching in silence. His long dark hair was pulled back with a strip of leather, his presence as steady as stone. The Apache warrior did not cry, but grief had carved itself into the sharp lines of his face. Bram had not merely been the man who paid him. He had been his friend, perhaps the only true one Koda had ever known among settlers. Wren remembered the day Bram first brought him to the ranch. "Best tracker in the territory," Bram had said, pride clear in his voice. "Saved my life once years back. I was half starved in the mountains. He taught me how to fish." Then Bram had laughed. "Turns out I was using the wrong bait the whole time." At first Wren had been wary. Back east newspapers told only of Apache raids, burned homesteads, slaughtered families. Yet Koda had shattered every brutal tale she'd been taught to believe. Quiet, disciplined, tireless. He worked harder than any man she had ever known. And slowly something unexpected took root. Bram and Koda became more than employer and hired hand. They shared meals, spoke late into the night, beside the fire, treated one another as equals crossing lines most men refused to acknowledge. Now Bram was gone, and Wren stood alone with land far too vast for one woman and an Apache whose dark eyes seemed to see through every careful layer she wore. "We should go back," Koda said at last, his deep voice cutting cleanly through her grief. "The sun is turning cruel. It will scorch you." She nodded and rose unsteadily. From Bram's grave, the entire ranch lay exposed: the cabin, with its soot-darkened chimney, the corral where 3 horses grazed the small garden she tended, and the endless stretch of land that now belonged solely to her. Land she had no idea how to protect. They walked in silence until Wren noticed 3 riders approaching from the east. She recognized them at once: Russ Calder, owner of the neighboring ranch, Sheriff Clay Horn of Copper Creek, and Preacher Elam, whose church she and Bram had visited only a handful of times. "They're coming to offer condolences," Wren murmured, though her stomach tightened. Koda's expression hardened. "They're coming to see what a widow does next." He was right. By the time they reached the cabin, the men had already dismounted. Rusk. Calder stepped forward, first broad-shouldered, and flushed his smile thin beneath the brim of his hat. Mrs. Vale, he said, "you have our deepest sympathies." Bram was a good man. "Thank you, Mr. Calder," Wren replied. Sheriff Horn followed, removing his hat. The lines in his face suggested well-practiced sorrow, a terrible loss. "If there's anything we can do," Preacher Elam added, clearing his throat, "perhaps you should consider returning east." "A woman alone in this territory—" "I'm not alone," Wren cut in. The firmness in her voice surprised even her. "I have Koda." The three men exchanged glances. Calder's eyes narrowed as they shifted toward the Apache. "Now that Bram is gone," Calder said carefully, "there's no reason for him to stay. I'd be willing to buy your land. Fair price. You could return to civilization, to your father." "My father disowned me when I married Bram," Wren replied coldly, "and this ranch is not for sale." Sheriff Horn stepped closer, sweat glistening at his temples. "Be reasonable, Wren. No proper woman runs a ranch alone, especially not with an Apache at her side. Folks will talk. Let them," she said, lifting her chin. "This land was Bram's dream," Wren said firmly. "It's all I have left of him." "Preacher," Elam tried once more, his polite smile, thin and well-practiced. "And the Apache, surely he'll wish to return to his own people." Every gaze shifted to Koda, too. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. But Wren noticed the tension in his shoulders, the subtle movement of his hand drifting closer to the knife at his belt. She spoke before he could. "Koda knows this land better than any man alive," Wren Vale said. "He's staying." She turned toward him, steadying herself, her pale eyes locking with his dark, guarded stare. "If you're willing." Something sharp and fleeting crossed Koda's eyes, too fast to name. Then he gave a single deliberate nod. Resolve, respect, commitment, all standing quietly between them. Rusk Calder's face flushed, the red deepening beneath his ginger whiskers. "This is madness," he snapped. A white woman, choosing to live with a savage Mr. Calder Wren, cut in her grief, hardening into anger. Koda was Bram's friend. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. He's educated, skilled. He's worked this land for 2 years, and I trust him with my life. The men left, soon after, their disapproval hanging in the air like dust stirred by retreating horses. Wren watched until they disappeared, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. "They'll be back," Koda said quietly beside her. "I know," she answered. "You should consider their offer," he added. "This life won't be easy." Wren turned toward him. In the fading light, with the Arizona sky stretching wide and endless, behind him, Koda looked as though he'd been carved from the land itself, unchanging, immovable, ancient as the mountains. "Bram once told me you saved his life," she said softly. "That you taught him how to fish when he was starving in the mountains." A faint smile touched Koda's mouth. "He used the wrong bait," he said. "Stubborn man. Teach me." Wren said suddenly, the words escaping before fear could stop them. "Teach me everything, how to run this ranch, how to read the land the way you do." She swallowed hard. "I can't do this alone. But I won't leave. This is our home. Bram is buried here." Koda studied her in the deepening dusk, his expression closed. "The neighbors won't accept this. The neighbors don't feed me," Wren snapped, then caught herself. "They don't keep this roof standing." She met his eyes again. "Will you help me, Koda? Please." The word lingered between them, soft, unfamiliar. Wren realized then that in 2 years Bram had never once spoken it to him. Koda was silent for a long moment. "I'll stay," he said at last, "until you no longer need me." That night, Wren cried herself to sleep in the cabin she had once shared with her husband. The empty space beside her felt endless and cold. Outside, beneath a sky crowded with stars, Koda made his bed near the dying fire, close enough to protect her if danger came, far enough to preserve what little propriety the world still demanded. Neither of them knew then that this arrangement would last 5 long years, or that with each passing day the distance between them would grow both more proper and more unbearable. The first year slipped by in grief and exhaustion. Wren quickly learned that ranching required more than hope. It demanded sweat, pain, and relentless endurance. Cattle needed constant care. Horses had to be broken and trained. Fences never stayed whole. Summer brought drought that cracked the earth and threatened their water. Autumn frost destroyed half the garden. Winter claimed 2 calves despite their efforts. Through it all, Koda remained, silent, steady, teaching. "The sky speaks," he told her one evening, gesturing toward a sunset burning red along the horizon. "Red clouds mean dry weather tomorrow. Good for laundry." Wren smiled, one of her first real smiles since Bram's death. "I thought they were just beautiful." "Beautiful things can still be useful," Koda replied, his gaze lingering on her a moment too long. He taught her how to track game, how to read shallow prints left by jackrabbits in the sand. He showed her how animals warned of rain, how lizards vanished before storms. He taught her to find water by watching the plants that survived when others died. In return, Wren learned to shoot with deadly precision, practicing for hours with Bram's old Winchester, until she could strike a tin can from 50 paces without hesitation. She learned to ride faster, harder, longer than she ever had before. Her body grew strong. Her skin darkened beneath the unrelenting sun. She learned to mend fences, argue prices, and stare down merchants who once tried to cheat a grieving widow until they realized she knew the value of every hide and grain sack. By the second year, the ranch no longer merely survived. It improved. The garden expanded. A small orchard of hardy fruit trees took root. 8 new head of cattle were added, and the mares delivered healthy foals. The cabin roof, once a leaking curse, was reinforced and sealed. Wren's hands toughened with layers of callus. Her hair grew lighter, still bleached nearly pale by the relentless sun. She was no longer merely enduring the land. She was being shaped by it. Out of necessity, she cut her hair shorter, though habit still drew her into one of her few dresses every Sunday, even when the road to town remained empty and untouched. On one such morning, Wren Vale stepped out of the cabin wearing a faded blue dress that had once been her finest. That was when she noticed Koda watching her. "What is it?" she asked, suddenly aware of herself. "Is something wrong?" Koda shook his head once. "You look like the sky after rain." The words caught her off guard, plain, unexpected, almost reverent. Heat rose to her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure how else to answer. That evening, over a shared bowl of rabbit stew, Wren found herself studying him in the firelight, the firm line of his jaw, the quiet strength in his shoulders. Hands capable of breaking bone, yet gentle enough to tend injured animals or press seeds into dry soil. "Tell me about your people," she said suddenly. "They're your family. Don't you miss them?" Koda stared into the flames for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, barely rising above the crackle of firewood. "My mother was Chiricahua Apache. My father was Mexican." He stayed. Firelight flickered in his eyes. "They were killed in a cavalry raid when I was 14. Wren held her breath. "I lived with my mother's sister until I was grown. Then I chose to walk alone." "Alone?" Wren asked quietly. "Why, I stood between worlds," he said. "Too Apache for white men. Too shaped by my father's blood for some of my own people." He met her gaze. "Bram was the first white man who saw me as neither savage nor servant." "Just a man," Wren murmured. Shame stirred in her chest as she wondered how often she herself had once seen him, through the same narrow lens as her neighbors. "And now," she asked gently, "do you still feel caught between worlds?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Now I am here." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. Here on this small ranch, clawed from the wilderness. Here with her. Something shifted inside Wren, then something she wasn't ready to name. By the 3rd year, the change between them could no longer be ignored. It lived in silences, in glances that lingered a moment too long, in the brief brush of hands that sent a sharp current through her chest. She told herself it was gratitude, survival, the closeness born of shared hardship. But in the quiet hours of night, when honesty had nowhere to hide, Wren admitted the truth. She was falling in love with Koda. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like recognition, like finally naming something she had been living with for years. Still they kept their distance. Koda slept outside, retreating to the small shed when storms turned cruel. Wren remained inside the cabin. The line between them held until one crisp autumn day when it nearly broke. They had ridden to the far edge of the property to inspect a damaged fence. Wren dismounted first, crouching to examine the break. Coyotes, Koda said, kneeling beside her. Too small for wolves. She nodded and reached for the tools. As she rose, her boot caught on a root. The ground vanished beneath her. Koda caught her instantly, his arms locking around her waist. For one breathless moment, her back pressed against his chest, his breath warm against her hair. Neither moved. She felt his heart racing, strong, unsteady, matching her own. His hands at her waist burned through the thin fabric of her shirt. "Wren," he whispered. Hearing her name on his lips broke something open inside her. She turned in his arms, her face lifting toward his. For one suspended instant she was certain he would kiss her. His eyes dropped to her mouth. His head tilted lower. Hoofbeats shattered the moment. They sprang apart just as Rusk Calder crested the rise with two of his riders. Well now, Calder called, his voice thick with suggestion. "Looking mighty cozy out here, Mrs. Vale." Wren straightened her dress, hands trembling. "Mr. Calder, we're repairing the fence." Calder dismounted, his gaze cold as it moved between her and Koda. "Is that what they're calling it? Folks in town have been talking. A white widow living alone with a savage ain't proper. What I do on my land is none of your concern," Wren said, her voice steadier than she felt. Calder stepped closer, tobacco heavy on his breath. "Maybe it should be. Bram was my friend. I doubt he'd approve of his widow lowering herself with Koda moved faster than Wren could follow." One moment Calder was sneering. The next he was stumbling backward. Koda's hand fisted in his collar. "You dishonor her with your words," he said quietly, "and you dishonor Bram's memory as well." The riders under Rusk, Calder, stiffened hands sliding toward their guns. Wren stepped forward without hesitation, placing herself squarely between them. "Enough," she shouted. She faced Calder head on, her spine straight, her gaze unflinching. "You're trespassing. Leave. Now." For a long, dangerous stretch of time, no one moved. The only sounds were harsh breaths and the restless stamping of horses tearing at the dirt. At last, Calder tugged at his collar. Fury and humiliation blotched his face. "This isn't over," he snarled. "No decent white woman chooses an Indian over her own kind." He pointed at her. "You'll regret this, Wren Vale." They rode off, leaving behind swirling dust and unspoken threats that hung heavy in the air. Wren turned toward Koda, fear tightening in her chest. "They'll come back," she said. "With the sheriff, maybe." Koda's jaw hardened. "I should go." "No!" The word escaped her before she could stop it. "No," she repeated, quieter now. "If we run, it'll look like we've done something wrong." "Haven't we?" he asked, searching her face. Wren had no answer. The truth sat too close to the surface, sharp, dangerous. That night, Koda moved his bed farther from the cabin. Wren noticed. She understood. Whatever had nearly happened by the fence could never happen again. Not for either of them. And so the fourth year began, distance carefully maintained. They worked side by side through daylight hours, speaking only of fences, water cattle. When night fell, they retreated to separate worlds. Wren to the cabin. Koda to the open sky. Yet sometimes, when she believed he wasn't watching, Wren studied him, the efficient grace of his movements, the quiet power in his hands, the rare smile that softened his solemn face. And on certain nights when she was sure he slept, she stood at her window, staring at his dark silhouette. Beyond the firelight, wondering if things might have been different in another life, another place. What she did not know was that Koda watched her too. The determination in her stride, the care she gave the animals, the way sunlight turned her hair to living gold. He watched and he wanted, and then he remembered his promise to Bram, to protect her, always, even from himself. The fifth year brought prosperity. The herd grew to 20 head. The garden produced more than they could consume. For the first time since Bram's death, Wren felt secure. She could have hired help, proper ranch hands to replace Koda's solitary labor, but she never suggested it, and he never asked. They had found a rhythm, a partnership that endured precisely because of the boundaries neither crossed. Then October came. It began as a dark line swallowing the sky. Wren was hanging laundry when she noticed the light fading too quickly. Storm coming. Koda said, appearing beside her with an armful of firewood. A bad one. She nodded, gathering the half-dry clothes. I'll secure the chickens. Can you check the horses? By nightfall, the storm struck with full force. Rain slammed into the cabin sideways. Wind screamed like a wounded thing. Lightning ripped the sky apart, thunder shaking the bones of the house. Wren paced, peering into the darkness. The small shed where Koda sometimes slept was barely visible through the downpour. Its roof sagged under the assault. A brutal gust tore part of it free. Metal shrieked and vanished into the night. Wren gasped. Without thinking, she grabbed the lantern, threw a shawl over her shoulders, and flung open the door. Koda, she shouted into the storm. Koda, come inside. For agonizing seconds there was no answer. Rain stung her face as the lantern flickered wildly. Wind clawed at her nightdress. Then a shape emerged. Koda stood soaked and shivering, his hair plastered to his face. He stopped at the threshold, water pooling at his feet. Their eyes met across the doorway, the boundary neither had crossed after dark in 5 long years. Let me in, he said. The words carried more than a plea for shelter. They both knew it. Wren stepped back, opening the door wider. Of course. He entered, bringing with him the scent of rain and wild sage. He stood awkwardly just inside water, streaming onto the floor. You're soaked through, Wren said, gathering towels to hide the tremor in her hands. You'll freeze. She handed him one and turned to stoke the fire, acutely aware of him behind her. When she turned back, he had removed his shirt. Wren's breath caught. His chest was broad and strong, marked by scars old and new, stories carved into skin. I'll find something dry, she said quickly, crossing to the trunk where she still kept Bram's clothes. She returned with a faded flannel shirt that had once belonged to her husband. Koda accepted it with a small nod. His fingers brushed Wren's as she passed it to him. The brief touch sent a sharp jolt through her, nothing to do with the lightning cracking outside. I'll make you something warm, she said, retreating to the narrow kitchen corner. As she reheated the leftover stew on the iron stove, Wren was keenly aware of Koda moving through the cabin. A space that had belonged only to her for years now felt altered, filled with his quiet presence. Koda paused by the shelves, taking in the worn books, the half-finished quilt, the pressed wildflower framed on the wall. You've made it beautiful, he said softly. Wren glanced up, spoon in hand. What, the cabin? He said. When Bram built it, it was only boards and nails. Now it feels like home, she offered. Koda nodded, his expression unreadable in the fire's glow. They ate in silence while the storm roared outside, the warmth within the walls suddenly rare and precious. Wren noticed how slowly he ate, as if each bite carried weight. She wondered if he felt it too, that once this night ended, nothing would return to what it had been. When they finished, she gathered the bowls and washed them in the basin. I've never asked, she said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet. Why you stayed all these years? You could have gone anywhere. The silence stretched long enough for doubt to creep in. Then Koda spoke, barely above a whisper. You know why. Her hands stilled in the soapy water. Slowly she turned. Koda stood near the fire, his features shaped by gold and shadow eyes reflecting the flames. Say it, Wren whispered. After 5 years, say it. He stepped closer, then closer still until his warmth surrounded her. I stayed because I made a promise to Bram, he said. To protect you. Disappointment pressed the breath from her chest. Is that all? Koda lifted his hand carefully and touched her cheek. His palm was rough from years of labor, yet the touch itself was impossibly gentle. I stayed because leaving you would have been like cutting out my own heart. Wren closed her eyes, leaning into his hand. How long? She asked. From the first day I saw you, he said. You were hanging laundry singing. The wind caught your hair. She opened her eyes. Why didn't you ever say anything? You were Bram's wife, he replied, then his widow. He gestured to his skin, to everything that marked him in white men's eyes. I thought it mattered. You thought I cared. Her voice broke. I thought you should. His thumb traced her cheekbone. The world is cruel to those who defy it. I don't care about the world, Wren said, covering his hand with hers. I care about you. I have for years. The confession hung between them, impossible to take back. Wren watched emotions cross his face, longing, fear, hope, resolve. Wren. He breathed her name like a prayer. Then they were kissing. Who moved first no longer mattered. 5 years of restraint collapsed into a single moment. His arms drew her close, her hands tangled in his rain-damp hair. The kiss deepened, urgent, tender, overwhelming. When they finally parted, breathless, Wren rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. Stay, she whispered. Not outside. Not anymore. Koda tilted her face upward. If I stay, Wren, I stay forever. There is no halfway for me. Forever. She repeated, terrifying, perfect. Yes. That night, as the storm raged beyond the walls, they talked for hours. They shared fears and hopes, secrets long held. They spoke of Bram with love and respect, naming the guilt that lingered while accepting that life continued, that love could grow again from loss. Koda told her of his childhood among the Chiricahua Apache, of his mother's skilled weaving, of his father, who taught him Spanish and English alongside his native tongue. He spoke of the cavalry raid that left him orphaned, of living between worlds, too Apache, for whites, too shaped by outsiders, for some of his own people. Wren told him of Boston, of Hollis Crow's rigid judgment, of her mother's quiet defiance in teaching her to think for herself. She told him how she met Bram at a friend's gathering, how his wild stories of the frontier captured her heart, and how her father raged when she announced their engagement. He said, I'd regret throwing my life away on a nobody from the frontier, she said softly. I never did. Wren said quietly, memory softening her voice. Not for a single day. Bram was a good man. Koda nodded. He saw people as they were, not as the world demanded they be. Like you, Wren said, lifting her hand to his face. And like you, Koda replied, turning his head to kiss her palm. He saw you. Now you see me. When words finally gave way to touch, they discovered one another, slowly, carefully learning the language of skin and breath, and whispered names. Later, as Wren lay in Koda's arms, watching firelight move across his sleeping face, she understood there would be consequences. Russ Calder and men like him would never accept what they had chosen. The town might turn its back. The law itself could threaten them. Yet for the first time since Bram's death, perhaps for the first time in her life, Wren felt whole. Whatever came, they would meet it together. She could not know how soon that promise would be tested. The storm moved on, but the change it brought remained. Koda stayed in the cabin from that night forward, though they kept separate sleeping arrangements. Whenever visitors might appear, a thin shield against the rumors they knew were already spreading. For 3 fragile, perfect months, they lived inside a small circle of happiness. The ranch flourished under their shared care. They ate together, traded stories, spoke of dreams, and more often than not, shared a bed. Wren taught Koda to read more smoothly using Bram's worn books. He taught her Apache words, laughing softly at her clumsy pronunciation. In the evenings, they sat on the porch, watching the desert blaze with impossible colors. Sometimes they spoke of the future of heading west to California or Oregon, where fewer eyes might judge them. Other nights they sat in silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. These were the happiest months of Wren's life. Then one clear January morning, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Wren was gathering eggs when she noticed him, an elegant figure astride a fine horse, moving with purpose rather than chance. Koda, she called alarm, sharpening her voice. He was at her side instantly, his hand drifting toward the knife at his belt as he followed her gaze. "Do you know him?" As the rider drew closer, the color drained from Wren's face. "Yes," she whispered. "It's my father." Hollis Crow had not aged kindly in the 7 years since she last saw him. His once broad frame had thinned, his red hair faded to gray, yet the rigid set of his shoulders and the commanding lift of his chin remained unchanged. He was still every inch the Boston businessman who had disowned his only daughter for marrying beneath her station. "Catherine," he said, stiffly as he dismounted. His cold eyes swept over her plain dress and sun-darkened skin before settling on Koda with open contempt. Father Wren replied, matching his tone. "What brings you to Arizona? A father needs no reason to visit his daughter. A father who disowns her does." His jaw tightened. "May we speak privately?" Koda stiffened beside her. Wren placed a steadying hand on his arm. "Anything you wish to say can be said here. Koda is my partner." A sneer twisted Hollis's mouth. "Partner? Is that what they call it out here? Why are you here?" Wren asked, forcing her voice to remain even. Hollis removed his gloves slowly, a delay Wren recognized from childhood. "Your Aunt Mara Crow has passed. As her only surviving relative beyond myself, you've inherited a considerable sum," Aunt Mara, Wren said, softly surprised. Her mother's sister had always been kind. Letters, small gifts, quiet defiance, even after Hollis's decree. "I'm sorry to hear it." "Yes, well." Hollis glanced around the ranch with thinly veiled disgust. "The inheritance could give you a fresh start, away from all this." Wren folded her arms. "This is my home. A shack in the wilderness is hardly a home for a Crow woman." "I'm not a Crow anymore," she said firmly. "I'm a Vale." His expression darkened. "Yes. Your unfortunate marriage. I heard of Bram's death. My condolences, late as they may be." The words sounded rehearsed, empty. Wren felt Koda shift beside her, stepping just slightly in front of her, instinctive protective. Hollis noticed. "I see you have found companionship in your widowhood," he said coolly. "Koda was Bram's friend," Wren replied. "He's kept this ranch alive. I'm sure he has." Hollis said, his smile cold and calculating. "Catherine, I've come to take you home. The inheritance is more than sufficient. You'll never need to work another day. You can reclaim your rightful place in society. My place is here." With a savage, Hollis spat the word. "Have you no shame?" Heat surged through Wren's chest. "The only shame I carry is having a father who measures a man by the color of his skin instead of the strength of his character." Hollis's face reddened. "You were always stubborn, just like your mother. That defiance put her in an early grave, and it will do the same to you if you stay in this godless wilderness." "You have no authority over me." "I have every authority," Hollis thundered. "I am your father. You forfeited that title when you turned your back on me for marrying Bram." Silence cinched the air tight. Koda, who had remained still throughout the exchange, finally spoke, his voice steady, controlled. "Mr. Crow, you've traveled far. Perhaps you should rest before continuing this conversation." Hollis looked at him, as though at dirt beneath his boot. "I don't recall addressing you Indian." Father Wren warned, stepping forward. "You are a guest here. You will show Koda respect, or you will leave." Something dark flashed in Hollis Crow's eyes. "Our property," he sneered. "Has he convinced you to sign over Bram's land? Is that his scheme?" "There is no scheme," Wren said through clenched teeth. "Koda and I run this ranch together. We share everything. Everything." Hollis's gaze moved between them, understanding settling in, followed by raw disgust. "God help us, Catherine. Tell me you haven't." "That's enough," Koda said quietly. The danger in his voice was unmistakable. "You disgrace your daughter with such accusations." Hollis's hand slid toward the inner pocket of his coat. Before Wren could react, Koda stepped fully in front of her. Koda, she began, then stopped. Hollis withdrew, not a weapon, but a folded document. I anticipated resistance, he said, his voice chillingly calm. This is a court order granting me temporary guardianship over you. Wren stared at the paper, disbelief crashing into fury. I'm 28 years old. You can't. The courts are quite accommodating, Hollis interrupted, especially when a woman is deemed vulnerable, living in frontier territory, under questionable influence, still grieving her husband. This is insane, Wren said. I am of sound mind. A woman of sound mind does not live with a savage, Hollis replied coldly. The sheriff in town agreed, quite eagerly. Nausea rolled through Wren. Russ called her. He must have written to her father, used Bram's old correspondence to track him down. You can't force me to leave, she said, though doubt crept into her voice. Hollis smiled thinly. Arrangements are already made. We depart for Boston by week's end. The ranch will be sold. The funds held in trust until you're deemed recovered. And if I refuse, then your Apache companion will be arrested for exploiting a white woman in distress. The punishment for such crimes is severe. The blood drained from Wren's face. She turned to Koda. His expression had gone completely blank, the same mask he'd worn in the early years when survival demanded silence. You wouldn't, she whispered to her father. To save my daughter from ruin, Hollis said evenly. I absolutely would. That night, after Hollis retired to the small guest room that had once served as Bram's office, Wren and Koda spoke in hushed voices by the fire. We could run. Wren whispered desperately. Tonight, take the horses. Head west. Koda shook his head. Your father would send men. They'd call it kidnapping. Then what, she pleaded. I won't go to Boston. I won't leave you. Koda took her hands. Wren, listen. Your father has power and the law on his side. If you defy him openly, he'll destroy everything we've built, and he won't stop until I'm dead. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can't lose you. Not now. Not after all of this. Koda brushed the tears away gently. You won't lose me, but we must be smarter than your father. She searched his face. What do you mean, go with him, he said quietly. Secure your inheritance. Free yourself legally. Wren stared at him in horror. That could take months. Years. I will wait, Koda said simply, his voice steady, as I have waited before. And the ranch. He intends to sell it. I have some savings, Wren said softly. Not much, but perhaps enough to buy a small parcel when the land is divided. Enough to hold until I return. She tightened her grip on his hands. You're asking me to trust this will work when the whole world seems determined to tear us apart. Koda lifted her face gently between his palms. I'm asking you to trust what we've built. To trust what lives between us. I do, Wren whispered, with all my heart. Then we will find our way back, he said. I swear it. They spent the night clinging to one another, memorizing warmth and breath, the fragile perfection of a love fully claimed, already under threat. At dawn, Wren told her father she would return to Boston under conditions. She would gain immediate access to her inheritance. She would retain control over her own affairs. And no harm would come to Koda. Hollis Crow, convinced of victory, agreed without hesitation. Of course, Catherine. Once you're removed from this influence, I'm confident you'll regain your senses. Within 3 days, everything was arranged. The ranch would be auctioned. Wren would travel east. Koda would vanish from sight. On their final night together, entwined in the bed, where a simple gold ring, once her mother's, rested on the nightstand, they held fast to one another, knowing the morning would tear them apart. Keep it, Wren whispered. Give it back to me when we're together again. Koda slid the ring onto a leather cord and settled it around his neck beside the medicine pouch he always wore. It will never leave me. At dawn, they said goodbye in the hush of the cabin, fierce, desperate, heavy with promises neither could be certain they would keep. 6 months, Wren murmured against his lips. No more. I'll be waiting, Koda said, tracing her face as though committing it to memory. Always. Later, as Hollis Crow supervised the loading of Wren's trunk onto the waiting wagon, Koda stood at a respectful distance, his expression unreadable. To any passerby, he was nothing more than a hired hand watching his employer depart. Only Wren saw the storm burning behind his eyes. Goodbye, Koda, she said, formally extending her hand. Thank you for your years of service. He took it, his thumb brushing her knuckles, once a hidden caress. Safe travels, Mrs. Vale. As the wagon rolled away, Wren did not look back. She could not bear the sight of him, standing alone before the cabin, where they had finally found one another, only to be torn apart. Beside her, Hollis smiled with quiet satisfaction. You're doing the right thing, Catherine. In time you'll understand. Wren said nothing. Her thoughts were already racing, calculating how swiftly she could secure her inheritance, how soon she could claim her independence, how quickly she could return to Arizona. 6 months she promised herself, 6 months to play the obedient daughter, 6 months to plan her escape back to the only place and the only man that had ever felt like home. What she could not know as this wagon crested the hill and the ranch vanished from sight was that fate had already chosen another course. Boston received Hollis Crow's prodigal daughter with equal measures of scandal and fascination. The story, carefully shaped by her father, painted Wren as a grieving widow rescued from frontier hardship, returning to reclaim her rightful place. Wren played her part flawlessly. She endured corseted gowns that felt like cages after years of practical dress. She attended endless teased dinners and musical evenings. She smiled politely at the parade of acceptable suitors, widowers and bachelors of proper standing, each eager to court the newly wealthy Miss Crow as her father insisted she resume her maiden name. All the while she hid her true purpose. Through careful questions posed to her father's lawyer, meticulous study of legal documents, and discreet conversations with her late aunt's financial advisors, Wren pieced together the scope of her inheritance and the freedom it could buy. News from Arizona, however, was grim. Letters sent to Sheriff Clay Horn regarding the ranch auction went unanswered. A telegram to Preacher Elam returned only vague assurances that matters had been settled. Of Koda, there was no word. 4 months into her confinement in Boston, Wren finally received a letter from Nell Ardis, the former postmistress of Copper Creek, who had always shown her kindness. The letter was brief and devastating. My dear Mrs. Vale, I regret to inform you that your property was auctioned as planned. Rusk Calder acquired the main house and northern acreage. The remaining land was purchased by the railroad for its proposed expansion. As for your inquiry regarding the Apache man, I hesitate to write this, but feel you deserve the truth. Shortly after your departure, there was an incident. Mr. Calder claimed your former ranch hand attempted to steal horses from the property. A posse was formed. Shots were fired. He fled into the mountains. Some say he was wounded. None have seen him since. With deepest sympathy, Nell Ardis Wren read the letter 3 times. With each reading, her hands shook harder. Wounded. Missing. Perhaps dead. Because of her father's schemes. Because of Rusk Calder's hatred. That night alone in the grand silence of her Boston bedroom, Wren made her decision. She would wait no longer. At first light, she went to the bank and withdrew a significant portion of her inheritance cash and banker's drafts. She purchased a westbound ticket under an assumed name. She packed only what she could carry in a single trunk, durable clothing, the remainder of her funds, and a small revolver, acquired quietly, through one of Hollis Crow's own business connections. 3 days later, while her father attended a prolonged meeting in New York, Wren Vale, not Catherine Crow, boarded a train bound for Arizona territory. The journey west was brutal. 6 days of rattling rail cars, dust-choked stagecoaches, and sleepless nights in rough frontier hotels. Wren scarcely noticed. Her thoughts held only but one purpose: finding Koda. The land shifted as she traveled from the green abundance of the east to endless plains and finally to the stark, unforgiving desert. With every mile, Boston loosened its grip. Her breathing steadied, her spine straightened. By the time she reached Copper Creek, Catherine Crowe was gone. She was Wren Vale, once more the woman who had faced drought, predators, and cruelty beside the man she loved. The town looked much the same after 6 months, the same dust-choked street, the same sun-bleached storefronts, the same curious stares following her steps toward the post office. Nell Artis gasped when Wren crossed the threshold. "Mrs. Vale, we were told you'd settled in Boston for good." "My father tells many stories," Wren replied flatly. None of them true. Over bitter tea in the postmistress's back room, Wren learned everything. Russ Calder had seized the ranch less than a week after her departure. The following day, he accused Koda of trespassing and theft. "They hunted him like an animal," Nell whispered, though no one else was near. Calder Sheriff Clay Horn and half a dozen men. They cornered him near Eagle Rock. There was gunfire. Calder claims the Apache fired first. Nell continued, but Wren pressed dread tightening her chest. Nell's eyes softened. "Bram always said your Koda was too smart to start a fight he couldn't finish and too honorable to steal." "Did they find him?" Wren asked, barely breathing. "No body," Nell said quietly. "Just blood on the rocks." Calder bragged that he'd wounded him. Some believed Koda died in the wilderness. Others claimed he crossed south into disputed land. Hope flared in Wren's chest. If anyone could survive wounded in the desert, it was Koda. He knew every spring, every hidden cave, every plant that could keep a man alive. "I have to find him," Wren said, her voice hardening. Nell looked stricken. "My dear, that's madness. Apache land is no place for a white woman alone. And if Calder learns you're back—" "Calder doesn't frighten me," Wren said, though the lie tasted bitter. He terrified her not for herself, but for what he'd already done to Koda. "And I won't be going as a society woman." Before dawn the next morning, Wren rode out of Copper Creek, dressed in men's clothing, canvas trousers, a loose shirt, a wide-brimmed hat, shadowing her face. Her hair was pinned tight and hidden. Dust and coffee darkened her skin. From a distance, she might pass for a young rancher or prospector. Her destination was Eagle Rock, the last place Koda had been seen. From there, she would follow his trail, as he had once taught her to track game, south into the mountains bordering Apache land. The journey was dangerous. Wren kept to dry washes and broken trails, avoiding open ground. She slept beneath the stars, her revolver always within reach. Each day she searched for signs, snapped twigs, shifted stones, anything that spoke of passage. For 3 days she found nothing. The desert guarded its secrets. On the 4th evening, as the sun sank low, she saw it. A narrow cave entrance nearly hidden behind juniper. The faintest trace of old wood smoke lingered in the air. Her heart pounded as she approached, hand resting on her revolver. "Koda," she called softly. "It's me, Wren." Only silence answered. She stepped closer, slipping into the cave's shadow. After the merciless sun, the interior felt cool and hollow. Darkness swallowed her vision as her eyes struggled to adjust. "Koda, are you—" The attack came from behind, fast, silent, precise. A powerful arm locked across her throat while another pinned her gun hand. Wren fought on instinct, but the grip was iron. Her breath faltered. Black spots flickered at the edge of her sight. Then a scent cut through the panic. Sage, leather, smoke, him. The pressure vanished instantly. She was spun around, pulled face to face with the man she had crossed a continent to find. Wren, Koda said, his voice rough disbelief raw within it. His hair hung longer now. His face was leaner, sharper. A fresh scar cut across his left cheekbone. but his eyes, dark, steady, unmistakable, were exactly the same. Koda, she breathed, reaching for him with trembling hands. He caught her wrists, holding her back. "What are you doing here?" he demanded quietly. "How did you find me?" "I came back for you," she said. "My father lied about everything. Russ Calder tried to kill you." "Lower your voice," Koda warned, glancing toward the cave mouth. "Calder and his riders still sweep these mountains." He guided her deeper inside. A small camp took shape in the dim bedroll, supplies a carefully shielded fire pit. In the low light, Wren noticed the way he favored his right leg. "You're hurt," she said, stepping closer. This time he didn't stop her. Her hands traced his face, the new scar, the sharper lines of his jaw, the tension he carried. "The bullet grazed my leg," he said softly. "I was lucky." "Lucky," Wren echoed her voice, breaking. "They hunted you because of me," Wren said, her voice breaking. "No," Koda corrected firmly. "They hunted me because of your father and Rusk Calder, not because of you." Her fingers found the leather cord at his neck, followed it beneath his shirt. There, resting beside his medicine pouch, was her mother's ring. "You kept it," she whispered. "I told you I would," he said quietly. "I keep my promises, Wren." Everything she had been holding back shattered then. Fear, longing, grief. It all poured out as she collapsed against his chest, sobbing out Boston, her father's grip, the endless pretending, the desperate journey west. Koda wrapped his arms around her as if the world itself were trying to tear her away. When her tears finally slowed, he lifted her face. "I shouldn't have come back," he said, though his eyes betrayed the lie. "It's too dangerous. I couldn't stay away," Wren answered simply. "Boston isn't my home. You are." Something fierce and tender ignited in his gaze. He kissed her, months of fear, hunger, and hope colliding at once. Wren clung to him, anchoring herself in the truth of his warmth, his breath, his heartbeat. When they finally parted, breathless, Koda rested his forehead against hers. "What now?" he murmured. "Calder has the ranch. Your father will come looking. We leave," Wren said without hesitation. "Together. I have money, my inheritance. Enough to start over. California, Oregon, even Canada." He studied her in the firelight. "You would give up everything for me." "I already did," she said softly. "The moment I boarded that train east." A rare, beautiful smile touched his face. "Then we built something new." That night, beneath a wide spill of stars, outside the cave, they spoke of land near the Pacific, of a northern ranch where the law was still young, where no one knew their names, where they might finally belong. At dawn, they packed what little Koda owned and what Wren had carried across a continent. They would ride south first, beyond Calder's reach, then turn west. Before mounting, Koda removed the leather cord from his neck. With solemn care, he freed the ring and held it out. "I return this to you," he said, "as I promised." Wren smiled and shook her head. "No, I want you to give it to me properly." Understanding lit his eyes. He lowered himself to one knee, careful of his wounded leg, the ring steady in his fingers. "Wren Vale," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet mountain air. "Will you be my wife, however we must make it so? Will you walk whatever road lies ahead with me?" "Yes," she answered at once. "In every way, on every path, for all our days." Koda slid the ring onto her finger, rose and kissed her. Not fugitives, now, not waiting, but bound together at last. A vow made, a future claimed. They had ridden scarcely a mile from the cave, following a narrow deer trail cutting south through scrub and stone, when the sound reached them. Hoofbeats, many horses, fast, closing from the north. Russ Calder, Koda said grimly, drawing his horse alongside Wren's. Her hand went instinctively to the revolver at her hip. "How did they find us?" "It doesn't matter," he said sharply. "We split up. I'll draw them off. You ride south." "No." Wren seized his arm. "We stay together. I will not lose you again." The thunder of hooves grew louder. Pain flickered across Koda's face. "Wren, please. If they catch us," she said, her voice unyielding, "then we face them together. I'm done running from men like Rusk Calder. I'm done hiding who we are." Before he could answer, riders crested the ridge above them. Rusk Calder rode at the front. Sheriff Clay Horn beside him. 4 more men followed, armed, hard-eyed, unfamiliar. Every one of them stared at Koda with open hatred. Well, now Calder called, his voice cutting clean through the morning air. "Look what we found, the thieving Apache." His gaze slid to Wren, recognition, twisting into something ugly. "Mrs. Smith, or should I say Miss Crow, your father's been hunting all over creation for you." Wren straightened in the saddle, chin lifted. "My name is Wren Vale, and I'm exactly where I choose to be." Calder's face darkened. "With your savage lover. Have you no shame, woman? The only shame here is yours, Rusk." Calder Wren shot back, heart-pounding voice steady. "You attacked an innocent man. You stole our ranch with lies and coercion." Innocent Calder spat. "He's a horse thief and a trespasser. He's my husband," Wren declared loud enough for every man to hear. She raised her hand. Her mother's ring flashed in the rising sun, and that ranch was our home. Silence rippled through the posse. Sheriff Clay Horn shifted uneasily in his saddle. One of the younger men removed his hat without thinking, as though confronted with something lawful, something binding. Calder recovered first, his face blotched with fury. "This is an outrage, Rusk," Calder snarled. "Sheriff, arrest them." Sheriff Clay Horn hesitated, reins tight in his hands. "On what charge, Calder?" "Marriage isn't a crime, even when it offends you." "He attacked me," Calder snapped. "Stole my horses." "Your horses." Wren Vale laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut the air. "Those animals were ours on our land. Land you seized through fraud," she went on, voice hardening, "while I was forced east against my will. I bought that ranch fair and legal at auction." Calder roared. "An auction arranged by my father with threats and lies," Wren shot back. She turned her gaze to the sheriff. "I have documentation proving my inheritance and my legal independence. Hollis Crow had no authority to sell my property." The papers rested in her saddlebag. Whether they would hold in a territorial court was uncertain, but doubt crept across several faces in the posse. "That's nonsense," Calder snarled, hands sliding toward his gun. "I won't let some Indian-loving whore take the shot split the morning." Calder screamed as his horse reared. He pitched sideways, clutching his shoulder, crashing into the dust. Blood darkened his sleeve. Every head snapped toward Wren. She sat perfectly still in the saddle, revolver, steady smoke curling from the barrel. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "The next bullet goes between your eyes, Calder," she said evenly, "unless you and your men turn around and ride away." Sheriff Clay Horn raised both hands slowly. "Now, Mrs. Vale, let's not make this worse." "He tried to murder my husband," Wren replied, gun never wavering. "He conspired with my father to steal our land, and he just reached for his weapon after calling me a whore. Tell me, Sheriff, how does this get worse?" No one answered. The men glanced at one another, then at Calder groaning in the dirt. Koda finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "We don't want bloodshed. We're leaving the territory. All we ask is safe passage." Sheriff Clay Horn studied them for a long moment. "Your father's offering a sizable reward for your return, Mrs. Vale." "My father no longer controls my life," Wren replied, "or my fortune. If you try to take me back, you'll have to kill both of us." The sheriff exhaled heavily, then nodded. "Calder, you need that shoulder tended." He turned to the others. "Get him on his horse, then back to Wren and Koda. Ride hard. Don't look back. Next time I see you, I may not be so generous." Relief surged through Wren. She lowered the revolver slowly. "Thank you, Sheriff." As the posse prepared to leave Rusk, Calder, pale with pain and fury, spat into the dust. "This ain't over," he snarled. "You hear me? This ain't over." Wren didn't answer. She and Koda turned south together into open country, toward a future no one would ever steal from them again. They rode south that day, west the next, and kept moving west for weeks beyond counting. The journey tested them at every turn, endless miles beneath punishing skies. Rivers crossed at dawn, mountain passes, where one misstep meant death. Yet every hardship was faced side by side. They avoided towns whenever possible, knowing a white woman and an Apache man, traveling together, invited danger more often than shelter. Still, kindness found them. The Morales clan shared tortillas and beans beside a cook fire. A railroad worker guided them safely through a treacherous stretch of mountains. An elderly Apache woman named Tala treated Koda's leg when the old wound flared, her hands steady, her eyes knowing. At last they reached California. They found a small coastal town where cultures mixed freely. Mexican, Chinese, European, native, and where curiosity outweighed hatred. With Wren's inheritance, they purchased a modest farm overlooking the Pacific. There, between wind and sea, they built a new life. On a cliff above endless water beneath an open sky, they made their vows. No preacher, no witnesses but circling gulls and the steady thunder of waves. Koda placed a ring woven from coastal grass on Wren's finger, beside her mother's gold band. Wren tied a strand of her sunlit hair around Koda's wrist. Their promises were spoken softly, but they were unbreakable. The farm flourished. Orchards took root. Horses filled the pastures. Koda's skill drew buyers from miles away. Wren opened a small evening school for the children of migrant workers, teaching letters and numbers after the fields fell quiet. In time, children came. 2 daughters and a son, Lark Vale and Ione Vale, who carried Wren's golden hair and Koda's quiet strength. Their son, Ash Vale, bore his father's dark eyes and his mother's quick smile. At first, neighbors stared. Then they learned. They came to respect the Apache man who read weather better than any almanac, and the fierce woman who could outshoot most men in the county. Prejudice never disappeared entirely. Some children were quietly warned away, some doors remained closed. Yet just as often a hand reached out in friendship, curiosity winning over fear. From time to time, word drifted west from Arizona. Russ Calder eventually sold what remained of the ranch and moved east. His wounded shoulder never truly mending, Hollis Crow searched for his daughter for years, growing old in bitterness, dying alone, his fortune untouched by affection or forgiveness. The railroad carved its way through Copper Creek, burying the old frontier beneath iron rails and steam. On clear evenings, Wren Vale and Koda sat on their porch, overlooking the Pacific fingers, laced listening to the rhythm of the waves. Above them, stars turned slowly across the sky, the same stars that once watched over Arizona. During those 5 long years when Koda slept outside her cabin, waiting for the storm that would finally draw him inside. "Do you ever regret it?" Wren asked once. Her hair was streaked now with silver. "All that we left behind." Koda smiled, that rare, quiet smile that still made her heart quicken even after a lifetime together. "How could I regret the road that led me here?" he said simply. "With you, I found my home." Wren rested her head against his shoulder. "And with you," she replied softly, "I found mine." As the sun slipped into the Pacific painting, the sky in colors rivaling the Arizona desert, they once called home, they held fast to one another. 2 souls who defied a world determined to keep them apart, who chose love over fear, who built a life strong enough to endure any storm. And now we offer our deepest thanks to you. If this story stirred something within you, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memory. More tales of courage, compassion, and destiny await you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for walking this road with us. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover, visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work